What's going on? In this video, we're going to be looking at center. It's like a box, but it does a couple of extra things for you, which is nice because even though all this you could code yourself, it's about saving those seconds and minutes in a project you're doing. We're also going to look at some of the variations of center. It's not just a center component, but there's a couple others that they give you to add a little bit more flexibility to your styling. And then at the very end, like what we always do, we're going to go over some exercises, make some stuff. I don't know if it's going to be serious or goofy, but hey, I'm going to show you how this stuff works and how to get it to work together. So let's get to seeing what's up. All right, so let's look at center. Center up here, it says, is a layout component that centers its child within itself. Maybe thinking, well, hey, I could just do this myself. It's no big deal. But it's really cool that they give you a specific component that will do this for you in more than one way. So if we look at the import down here, we can see below there's a center, but also a square and a circle. So let's read these here. The center centers its child given its width and height. The square does the same given its child's size, which is also its width and height. And then a circle, and it says a square with a round border radius. And if we look at this, we'll say, hey, this looks very, very, very similar to a box, right? We could do anything with a box, and this looks incredibly similar to the tutorial that we just watched, or at least hopefully just watched. But it's just doing something a little bit extra, a little bit more to simplify your life, which is really kind of cool. So we see here we have center, backgrounds, tomato. I don't know if they like tomatoes over there, but we got tomato, color white for the text. And you can see that this is centered very, very nicely in here. Now, if we come down, we can see we could do it with icons. Okay, that's cool. We're not really learning anything new from that. We do see this thing called HStack. There's a video coming up for it, or later in the series if it's already been released. And it's just a way of organizing your elements on the screen here. So just know this is more of an organizational feature, and don't pay attention to it. It's not doing anything specific to these centers or icons or anything. So as we come down here, we see square and circle, and we can see that the circle is almost identical to the square. It obviously just has a rounded border edge there. And that's pretty much it. It's really cool that they do this for you. And it may seem kind of like, well, I could just do this myself. But always think about the time that you save when a development team makes something like this for you. It's less CSS, less complexity, and you could just slap this in your code and go. And speaking of coding, I feel like doing some coding, so let's go see what we can make with these. So for our first example here, we're going to make a circle, and then inside of that, we're going to make another circle. Now, the way I'm going to be doing this is not how you typically would if you were doing a serious project. You would use CSS animations and all that. But to simplify it, I'm going to use some hooks, and I'm going to make two concentric circles, and then I'm going to grow them. Of course, this will cause errors in the console, but I just want to show you, I think, a fun example of using circles. So let's get to coding. Okay, so now that we have our concentric circles here, I think I'm using the word concentric correctly. It's been forever since I've done anything really using that word. I just wanted to sound fancy. We can see we have some unused resources down here. I don't know why sometimes my Visual Studio Code just brings in things like render from the testing library, clearly not needing it, but such is life. So we have a chakra provider here. Obvious, you'll see them in every video we do. And then we have a circle, and then another circle component being brought in inside of it. Now, these circles are like boxes, except they have the rounded edges, as you can clearly see. Now you can make them into a circle, and they also center the content that is inside. So this circle is centering the circle on the inside, which in that case, this most inner circle here is centering in the dead center this text that says hello. Now, if you think about this from a perspective of creating components, think about the ability to make your own buttons. Say we don't do circles, say we do something like a square up above, which I'll show you an example of in just a moment. But think, if you're able to make, say, a little button inside of here, or make this inner circle, as button, for example, now you could click on this, right? And so think about the animation, the CSS, all the other stuff that you then could just, type out. But you can see it's making design pretty easy for you off the bat. And I think this is pretty cool. So now one thing I'm going to do, or I'm going to make the Chrome browser here upset, is I'm going to use a use effect, and I'm just going to grow this from 0 by 0 into its state that it is here, just because I want to show you something fun, I guess. So let's go ahead and do that. And we see here that it rendered twice at the beginning there. That's because I think the values are resetting every time it goes through this use effect here. And like I said, this isn't the most proper way to do it. If we look in here, we will see that it's screaming at us that the maximum depth is exceeded. Like I said, you do want to use animations for these, but I think that's, just fine for a, brief fun example. But as we see here, we have the circle inside of a circle, and we're hooking up the width and the height to our use state right here. And when we go through the use effect, every time it loads, it'll take the previous value. So in this case, 0, and it'll be 0 plus 1, then 1 plus 1, then 2 plus 1. And that's how it, grows that way. And I've hooked them up to the big circle and then the smaller concentric circle. And then down here, unless the small circle is essentially its full size, do not give me any value. But essentially when it's done at 450 pixels here, it's going to say hello at the end. So this is circles. And in the next example, I'm just going to show you how to use the boxes, centers, and as well as squares. So let's check that one out. All right, in this example, we're going to do something a little less sexy than grow some circles. But what I'm going to do is show you how to use the box, center, and then how you just kind of stack them inside of each other. And yeah, let's get to it. All right. So what we see here is the finished product. And sorry for that brief error that occurred. I guess I got rid of my return. I really need to look into how this formats my React code, because sometimes it's very annoying when you're coding and you don't do anything wrong, but your IDE is like, I think you really want to do this, and it blows up your code. So what we see here is we see a square, square, Then we center the square, and then we have another center, and then the circle on the inside, which is a button. Now, when we click, nothing special happens. That's fine. It's okay if it's not doing anything, special here. But if you were to catch there at the very end, what I did have here was a box. And everything was fine. We have the gray 100. The box is doing what it's supposed to. But as soon as I change it to a square, we could think of it as a box, but then now it has more meaning for us. And now centers this square, this, I guess you'd say concentric square, that's the word of the day, inside of it here. And from there, I want to center the square on the inside here. And then I center in this way. Now, these extra centers may be a little bit gratuitous. I was just kind of creating this example last night before I recorded it now. So there could be ways to improve this here. But now that you have this functionality here, this is pretty cool, because if we were to go into inspect mode and say we were to have this in an iPad and we were to turn it sideways, we could see now if we're able to put it in a grid or some kind of other containment structure that nothing is flying around, nothing is flying off the rails. Because sometimes when you're working with CSS styling using components, you have these issues where you're like, yeah, it looks pretty damn good. And then you turn it sideways and all hell breaks loose. And you can see right here, there's no issues or oddities going on. And so I think that is super cool, because that's kind of one less thing you have to worry about when, working with stuff like this. So if you're into CSS and you just want to hard code it yourself to get this, go for it. Nothing's stopping you. You're a pro. But if you want to just rely on some quick slap in code to kind of get this up and going in just, maybe the same amount of time, then use Chakra. But thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe. I really dig y'all coming on in. And let's check out the next video.